Ladies and gentlemen, when you lose all hope, it feels like the world is crumbling beneath you. Every ounce of strength you once had slips through your fingers, and the weight of uncertainty presses down on you. But I want you to understand something. You are not buried. You may feel like it, but what if I told you that in that moment, you're actually being planted? God does His best work in the dark. He works in the places where we feel the most lost, because in those moments, our faith is sharpened and His power is magnified. I know it's easy to think that just because you feel hopeless, you are hopeless. Your feelings, though real and valid, aren't the truth. They're not facts. You may feel like giving up, but your feelings are fleeting. They don't define you. What defines you is something deeper, something eternal. You are not a victim of your circumstances. You are not your doubts or your fears. You are a child of God, loved beyond measure, and even in the darkest moments, you are held in His hands. When you've reached the end of your strength, that's when the true power of God can take over. Your weakness becomes the very thing that creates space for His strength. Your limitations aren't obstacles for God, they're opportunities for His greatness to be displayed in your life. In the moments when you think you can't go on, that's when you're standing on the edge of a breakthrough. Don't let your weariness trick you into thinking you're at your end. You're not. You're just at the beginning of something new. Faith isn't the absence of struggle. It's the decision to keep moving forward through the struggle. It's choosing to trust even when everything around you tells you to quit. The road ahead may seem unclear, but faith doesn't need clarity. It just needs to keep going. It needs persistence, resilience, and the courage to believe that something better is ahead. Struggle doesn't mean you failed. Struggle is often the sign that you're on the brink of something significant. Your breakthrough is being shaped in the very place where you're wrestling with doubt and fear. There is purpose in the pain. I know it doesn't always make sense, but God never wastes your hurt. The very things that break you are the things He will use to build you. The scars you carry aren't just reminders of your battles, they're proof of your victories. They're the marks of someone who fought, who endured, and who came out stronger on the other side. God is using your pain for something far greater than you can see right now. And in time, you will see how it all fits into His perfect plan for your life. Hope isn't a feeling, it's a focus. When you lose all hope, it's easy to focus on everything that's gone wrong, on what you've lost, or on what you don't have. But hope is about shifting your gaze from what you don't have to what's ahead. Hope is about looking forward, trusting that God has something better for you, even if it doesn't look like it in the moment. Hope isn't about ignoring the struggle. It's about focusing on the promise that the struggle is not the end of the story. What you're walking through today is preparing you for what's coming tomorrow. So, when you lose all hope, don't give up. Instead, lean in. Trust that God is working in the dark, that your strength is being renewed, and that He has a purpose for your pain. Keep moving forward. Hold on to faith. Keep your focus on the promise, not the problem. And know that in the moments when you feel hopeless, God is right there with you, carrying you through and lifting you up. God does His best work in the dark. When we find ourselves in the most difficult and confusing seasons of life, it's easy to think that we're abandoned or that we're simply stuck in a hopeless place. But in reality, the dark is the very place where God does some of His most transformative work. It's in the darkest moments that the seeds of purpose are often planted. It's when things seem the most uncertain, when everything around us feels like it's falling apart, that God is setting up the conditions for something greater. Just think about the way nature works. A seed has to be buried in the soil before it can sprout. It doesn't grow in the open air, exposed to the elements. It needs to be buried, to be hidden for a while in order to break through and eventually flourish. Similarly, in our lives, we often feel like we're buried under the weight of our circumstances. We feel alone, overwhelmed, and unsure of what comes next. But God uses those times of darkness to cultivate something inside of us, something that we may not even see at the moment. The dark isn't just a place of despair, it's a place where growth happens beneath the surface. In those quiet, painful moments, God is often working in the unseen places, preparing us for what's ahead. When everything around you feels like it's in chaos, remember that God's plan is still at work. He's not distant. He's not absent. He's working in. The same is true for us. It's in the dark that our character is refined, our faith is tested, and our dependence on God is strengthened. Without the darkness, there would be no light to shine through. Without the struggle, there would be no testimony. And without the waiting, there would be no room for patience to grow. So when you feel like you're in a dark place, don't despair. It's not the end. It's the beginning of something. God is at work even when you can't see Him. Trust that in the darkness, He is shaping you, preparing you, and setting you up for what comes next. Your breakthrough may be closer than you think, and it may be birthed from the very place you thought was the end. Just as a seed is buried in the soil before it can sprout into something beautiful, sometimes God has to hide us away for a season before He reveals the full scope of His plan. And when He does, it will be worth every moment of the wait. Your feelings aren't facts. It's a powerful truth to hold on to, especially in moments when everything inside of you tells you to give up, to quit, or to believe that you're not enough. Feelings are real, yes, but they are not the final word on your situation. Too often we let our emotions dictate the way we see ourselves and the world around us. We let them define what is true, but feelings are fleeting. They come and go, shift and change, sometimes without any clear reason. What you feel in one moment doesn't have to be the reality you live in forever. We live in a world that often tells us to trust our feelings above all else. We hear phrases like, follow your heart or do what feels right. But the truth is, our hearts are often conflicted, and what feels right in one moment may lead us to regret later on. Feelings can mislead us. They are influenced by our circumstances, our physical state, our relationships, and even the things we're watching or reading. Feelings are shaped by the world around us, and because of that, they can be unreliable. Think about Ithal. Many times have you woken up feeling down, defeated, or even hopeless, only to find later in the day that your mood has completely shifted. Our emotions can change in an instant. One phone call, one good conversation, one moment of encouragement can completely transform the way we feel. That's because feelings don't have to be the driving force behind our lives. We don't have to make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. What is true is that we are not defined by our feelings. Your worth isn't determined by how you feel on any given day. God's love for you is constant and unchanging, regardless of your emotional state. His promises remain firm, even when your heart feels uncertain. He doesn't pull back His grace when you're struggling to believe. His love doesn't ebb and flow with your mood swings. In fact, it's in those moments of doubt, pain, or confusion that God's truth speaks the loudest. When you feel like you're not enough, when you feel like you're failing or falling short, remember that those feelings don't reflect the reality of who you are in Christ. The Bible reminds us time and time again to stand firm in what we know to be true. When the world tries to tell us who we are based on how we feel, God tells us to look at the truth of who He says we are. He says we are His children, fearfully and wonderfully made, chosen, loved, and redeemed. These truths don't change with our emotional highs and lows. In those moments when your feelings are telling you one thing, remind yourself of what you know is true. You may feel weak, but He is your strength. You may feel lost, but He is your guide. You may feel insignificant, but in His eyes, you are priceless. Feelings don't define you. God does. His truth is unshakable, and it's that truth that you can cling to when everything else feels uncertain. So the next time you're overwhelmed by emotions, when fear, doubt, or sadness try to take hold, remember, your feelings may be real, but they are not your reality. Your reality is what God says about you, and that will never change. The end of your strength is the start of His. We often find ourselves in situations where we feel like we've reached our limit physically, emotionally, spiritually. We push ourselves, try harder, do everything we can, and yet it feels like we're getting nowhere. We reach the point where we're drained, exhausted, and the thought of continuing feels impossible. But here's the truth. The end of your strength isn't the end of your journey. It's actually the beginning of something greater. When we run out of our own energy, our own wisdom, and our own ability to keep going, we make room for something more. We make room for God's power to take over. We often think that we need to have everything figured out, that we need to be strong enough, capable enough, or wise enough to handle the challenges life throws at us. But God doesn't require us to be perfect. He doesn't need us to have it all. Think about the Apostle Paul, who prayed 3 times for God to remove his thorn in the flesh, something that was causing him great distress. God's response wasn't to take away the problem. Instead, he said, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Paul went on to say, "Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." When Paul's strength ran out, he found that God's strength was more than enough. In fact, it was in his weakness that God's power was most clearly seen. This truth is a reminder that our struggles are not a sign of failure. They are opportunities for God to show us how much more He can do than we ever could on our own. The end of your strength is just the beginning of His. When you feel like you've done everything you can and you're running on empty, don't be discouraged. Instead, surrender. Trust that in your weakest moment, God's power is ready to fill the gap and carry you through. The moment you can't go any further is the moment that His power can move in ways you never imagined. So let go of your need to control and allow God to show you what He can do when you've reached the end of your own strength. Faith is not the absence of struggle. Too often we associate faith with a life free from challenges or hardships, thinking that if we believe hard enough, we should be able to avoid difficulty altogether. But that's not the reality of faith. In fact, faith often shows up most powerfully in the midst of struggle. It's in the hard times, the times when everything feels like it's falling apart, that faith is tested, refined, and proven. Struggle doesn't mean that you lack faith. Struggle doesn't mean you failed or that God has forgotten you. On the contrary, struggle is often the very thing that strengthens our faith. It's when we face opposition, when we encounter obstacles, that we truly discover what we're made of. Faith isn't a shield that keeps us from pain or difficulty. It's the strength that carries us through it. It's the ability to keep believing even when things aren't going the way we want them to. It's not about avoiding the storm. It's about trusting God to help us weather it. Think about the story of the Israelites. God didn't lead them straight into the promised land without any trials. Instead, He led them through the wilderness, a place of struggle, uncertainty, and hardship. They faced hunger, thirst, and fear, but it was in that wilderness that God revealed Himself to them in powerful ways. Their faith wasn't about being free from struggle. It was about trusting God's faithfulness even in the struggle. It was in the desert that they learned to rely on Him for provision, guidance, and protection. In the New Testament, we see that the apostles also faced immense struggles. Paul, for example, was imprisoned, beaten, and shipwrecked for the sake of the gospel. Yet, he never wavered in his faith. In fact, he considered his struggles to be a way to glorify God. He understood that faith wasn't about living a life of ease. It was about standing firm in the promises of God even when life was difficult. It was about continuing to walk forward even when the road was hard, because he knew that God was with him every step of the way. Faith is not a denial of reality. It's not pretending that the struggles don't exist or that the pain isn't real. Faith is acknowledging the reality of the struggle while choosing to believe that God is greater than the struggle. It's knowing that no matter how hard things get, God's presence will never leave us. It's the confidence that He will use our pain for His purpose, even if we don't see the outcome right away. When we face struggles, it's easy to question whether God is with us or if He cares about our pain. But faith is the conviction that even in the darkest moments, God is still good and He's still working. It's trusting that the challenges we face aren't meaningless. They are opportunities for God to reveal His power and to shape us into the people He's called us to be. It's in the struggle that we learn patience, perseverance, and trust. It's in the struggle that we come to understand the depth of God's grace and His ability to turn even the most difficult circumstances into something beautiful. So, if you're struggling right now, don't let that discourage you. Don't let it shake your faith. Instead, let it strengthen your resolve. Faith isn't about avoiding the storm. It's about trusting God to carry you through it. It's about believing that even in the midst of your struggle, God is still working and He is still with you. Your faith isn't in vain. It's being refined, tested, and grown in the very place you might feel weakest. Keep going even when it's hard, because your faith is not just about the absence of struggle. It's about how you respond to it with the assurance that God is with you no matter what. There's purpose in the pain. When we're facing challenges or walking through a season of uncertainty, it's natural for our feelings to fluctuate. One day we might feel optimistic, believing that everything will work out, while the next day doubt and fear may creep in, making us feel as if all hope is lost. But true hope isn't something that rises and falls based on our emotions. It's something we choose to hold on to, something we focus on in the midst of the storm, knowing that there is a greater purpose at work and a brighter future ahead. Hope is about looking beyond what's right in front of us. It's about choosing to see what God is doing in the long run, even when we can't yet see the full picture. It's about setting our gaze on what is promised, on the faithfulness of God, and on the truth that He is always working, even when we can't see the outcome right away. Hope doesn't ignore the reality of hardship or pretend that everything is okay. Rather, it's a choice to believe that despite the challenges, God is still in control and there is something good coming out of what we're walking through. When we focus on the circumstances, we become overwhelmed by them. We start to believe that our situation defines us or that our struggles will never end. But when we focus on hope, we shift our perspective. We begin to focus on the fact that God's promises are greater than our present difficulties. We focus on the truth that He is always with us, that He will never leave us, and that He is working all things for our good, even when we can't see it yet. Hope doesn't ignore the struggle. It rises above it, choosing to see what's possible, not just what's immediate. The Bible encourages us to set our eyes on things above, not on things below. This doesn't mean ignoring the reality of life, but it means choosing to focus on the eternal and unshakable truths of God's Word. Hope is the ability to focus on the future God has promised, even when the present feels uncertain. It's a focus on His faithfulness, His goodness, and the assurance that He is working out His perfect plan in our lives. Hope is anchored in something much greater than our emotions or circumstances. It's rooted in God's unchanging nature. Think of a runner in a race. They don't focus on the pain or the exhaustion in the moment, or they'd never make it to the finish line. Instead, they keep their eyes on the goal ahead, the prize that awaits them. The race may be hard, but the runner knows that the finish line is worth it. In the same way, our hope is like that focus on the finish line. We may face obstacles, pain, and struggle, but our focus is on the end result, the promise of what's ahead. That focus gives us the strength to keep going, even when it feels like we can't take another step. Hope doesn't come from our circumstances or our emotions. It comes from knowing that God is faithful. He has never failed us, and He won't start now. When we choose to focus on His promises, we are filling our hearts with the strength and courage we need to press forward. Hope keeps us from being consumed by fear, doubt, and despair, because it reminds us that what we see today is not the end of the story. The best is yet to come, and even in our darkest moments, we can trust that God is leading us towards something good. So, if you find yourself in a place where hope feels hard to come by, remember this: hope isn't a fleeting emotion. It's a choice to focus on the truth of who God is and the promises He has made. It's a decision to believe that no matter what we face, there is always something to look forward to. When your feelings are telling you to give up, choose to focus on the hope that comes from God and let that hope carry you through. It may not change your circumstances immediately, but it will change how you view them, and that shift in perspective can make all the difference. In the end, hope isn't just something we wait for, it's something we choose, something we focus on with unwavering conviction, even when life doesn't make sense. Our faith isn't defined by the absence of struggle or the absence of pain, but by how we choose to move forward in the midst of it. When we come to the end of our own strength, it's where God's strength begins, and it's in our weakest moments that His power shines brightest. Remember, God's work isn't limited by our circumstances, and His purpose isn't thwarted by our pain. Every trial, every challenge, every hardship has a purpose that is working for our good and His glory. So hold on to the truth that no matter what you face, there's always purpose in the pain. There's always a greater plan unfolding. And in the darkest times, God's light will never leave you. Keep your focus on what is eternal. Trust in the promises of God and know that through it all, hope will carry you through. You are never alone, and the best is yet to come. Thank you.